They thought hitting delete all would erase my work forever. But they forgot one thing. I designed it to never disappear. They deleted files. I opened my crypto wallet. 8 years of building, one mouse click, a network no one controls. And what they called termination? That was when I took everything back. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Minnesota, now living in Denver. This is the story of how I lost everything I built and then reclaimed it all with a single transaction. 8 years ago, I was just another tech worker with a crazy idea. My studio apartment in the less fashionable part of Denver cost $875 a month, which felt steep for what it was, essentially a glorified closet with a kitchenette and a window that looked out at another building's brick wall. But it was mine. And more importantly, it was where I kept my trusty, if somewhat outdated, laptop and my beloved whiteboard that I'd named Gloria. Gloria and I spent most nights together back then. While my college classmates were climbing corporate ladders or pursuing advanced degrees, I was mapping out a system that nobody believed could work. Nobody except me. I called it the Predictive Behavioral Engine. The name wasn't exactly poetry, but it described what I was trying to build, an AI system that could analyze patterns in social media behavior and predict when and how media crises would develop. Not just react to them, predict them before they happened. Every tech company claimed to have predictive analytics, but they were all backward-looking, identifying patterns after they emerged. I wanted something that could see the storm brewing before the first raindrop fell. When I tried explaining my idea at tech meetups, I got polite nods and quick exits. Social media is too chaotic, they'd say. Human behavior is inherently unpredictable, others would insist. One memorable venture capitalist actually laughed in my face before suggesting I try something more achievable, like a food delivery app. But I knew they were wrong. There were patterns in how information spread, in how outrage built, in how narratives took shape. You just needed the right algorithms to see them. So I kept coding, kept refining my models, kept testing against historical data. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, so cheap it barely qualified as caffeine. I turned down job offers from respectable tech firms because I just knew, that what I was building could change everything. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd splurged on pad thai, a rare deviation from my budget meal plan. I was running a simulation against a particularly messy product recall crisis from the previous year when my system correctly identified the inflection points, the exact moments when the crisis accelerated, when it peaked, and when it began to fade. I ran it against another crisis. Same result, and another, and another. By dawn, I had verified the model against 17 different corporate crises from the past 3 years. The predictive behavioral engine wasn't just working, it was showing me things even crisis management experts had missed at the time. Within a month, I had a working prototype and a presentation that I sent to every media management and PR firm I could find. Most never responded. Some sent form rejections. 3 scheduled calls that they later canceled. But then Auratech Media Solutions reached out. At the time, they were a mid-sized player in the corporate communications space, known for representing Fortune 500 companies during their worst PR nightmares. Their VP of Innovation, a woman named Melissa Trent, actually listened to my full pitch without interrupting once. When I finished, she asked just one question. How soon can you meet our CEO? 2 days later, I was sitting across from Dennis Marshall, Auratech's founder and CEO. He was old school, the kind of PR veteran who had managed crises before social media existed. But unlike many of his peers, he recognized how the landscape had changed. If this works the way you say it does, he told me after my demonstration, it changes everything about crisis management. We stop playing defense and start playing offense. I'll never forget what he said next. Name your price. This was the moment I dreamed of. The validation, the opportunity, the potential payoff for years of living on the edge of financial ruin. This was my chance to cash in. But I didn't want to cash in. I wanted to build. $1, I said. Dennis thought I was joking. When he realized I wasn't, he actually seemed concerned. Rachel, That's not how this works. Your technology is worth millions if it does even half of what you're claiming. $1, I repeated, plus 3 conditions. He leaned back in his chair, intrigued. I'm listening. First, I want a minority equity stake in Auratech. I had done my research. Dennis owned 51% of the company, and I knew he wouldn't give up control. That's doable. He nodded. What else? Second, I want to stay on as chief strategic advisor for a minimum of 5 years, with the option to renew. He nodded again. And the third? This was the critical one. If I'm ever terminated without cause, I retain the right to purchase back my original system and all derivative works for $1. Dennis frowned slightly. That's unusual. So is selling something for $1, I countered. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. You know, most people would just ask for a big check. You're playing a longer game. This isn't a game to me, I said. This is my life's work. 2 weeks later, we signed the agreement. The predictive behavioral engine officially became the property of Auratech Media Solutions for the sum of $1. With my 3 conditions captured in the fine print, specifically in Clause 19B of the acquisition agreement. For the first 3 years, it was everything I could have hoped for. Dennis was true to his word. I had resources, a team, and the backing of an established company. We refined the engine, expanded its capabilities, and integrated it into Auratech's client offerings. The results spoke for themselves. Clients who used our system experienced 68% fewer crisis events and recovered from unavoidable crises 41% faster than industry averages. My whiteboard Gloria came with me to my new office. Some of my team members thought it was quirky that I'd named it, but they quickly learned that some of our best breakthroughs happened during what I called Gloria sessions. Intensive problem-solving meetings where we'd map out solutions the old-fashioned way before translating them into code. Everything changed when Dennis announced his retirement. He'd built Auratech from nothing into a major player in the corporate communications field. And after 30 years, he was ready to enjoy the fruits of his labor. The board conducted an executive search and settled on Bryce Kellen, formerly the chief growth officer at a major advertising conglomerate. From the moment Bryce arrived, I knew we were in trouble. He was all surface, no substance. His vocabulary consisted almost entirely of business buzzwords, synergistic potential, strategic pivots, growth hacking the paradigm. He could talk for an hour without saying anything meaningful. Worse, he seemed allergic to technical discussions. His eyes would glaze over the moment anyone mentioned algorithms or data architecture. Within his first month, he'd hired Kendra Vale as the new VP of Marketing. Kendra had come from a consumer products background and was determined to make our B2B service more accessible and engaging. Her first big idea, rebranding the predictive behavioral engine as Zappy and giving it a cartoon lightning bolt mascot. We need to humanize the technology, she explained during a marketing presentation. Predictive behavioral engine sounds so mechanical. Zappy is friendly. Zappy is approachable. Zappy protects your brand from social media storms. I sat through that meeting in stunned silence. This sophisticated system that could parse millions of data points to identify emerging narrative patterns was being reduced to a cartoon character named Zappy. That was just the beginning. Over the next several months, I watched as everything Dennis and I had built began to erode. My strategic advisory role became increasingly symbolic. Meetings happened without me. Decisions were made and then announced as fate's accomplice. One day, I arrived at work to find my office had been reimagined while I was at an overnight conference. Gloria, my faithful whiteboard, had been replaced with a sleek digital display. My books and notes had been boxed up and placed in storage. The space now featured a meditation corner with floor cushions and a small fountain. We're creating inspiration spaces throughout the building, Bryce's assistant explained cheerfully. Your old setup was very 2010s. This is designed to optimize emotional intelligence and creative flow. I stood there, holding my coffee, feeling like I'd walked into someone else's office. Where's my whiteboard? I asked. Oh, those old things were all recycled, very eco-friendly. But don't worry, the new displays have whiteboard apps with infinite space and automatic cloud backup. It wasn't the same. Gloria wasn't just a whiteboard. She was a symbol of where I'd started. A reminder of those long nights in my studio apartment when it was just me and my idea against the world. That night, I went home and pulled out my copy of the acquisition agreement. I read through it carefully, paying special attention to Clause 19B, my insurance policy. The language was clear. If I was terminated without cause, I could repurchase my original system and all derivative works for $1. I hadn't thought I'd ever need to use it. Dennis had understood the value of what we were building together. But Bryce? Bryce saw the engine, Zappy, as nothing more than another product in the portfolio, a black box that somehow made predictions that helped clients. He didn't understand it, didn't respect it, and increasingly, it seemed he didn't respect me either. That was when I started preparing for the worst. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being prudent. First, I made comprehensive backups of everything, the original codebase, all subsequent improvements, documentation, test results, everything. I didn't just save it to an external drive or cloud storage. Those could be blocked or wiped remotely if things went south. Instead, I encrypted everything and stored it on a personal blockchain I'd set up on the Polygon network. The beauty of blockchain isn't just its security, it's its permanence and decentralization. Once something is properly stored on a blockchain, it exists across thousands of computers worldwide. No single entity can delete it or deny access to it. I also reached out discreetly to key members of my original team, the ones who understood what we'd built and why it mattered. I didn't say anything explicit, but I made sure they knew that if things changed suddenly at Auratech, I had a plan. Keep your options open, I told my lead developer, Marcus, over lunch one day. And maybe don't sign any new leases or make major financial commitments for the next few months. He gave me a knowing look. That bad, huh? I just nodded. We both knew what was happening. The quarterly all-hands meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Bryce had been hyping it for weeks, promising game-changing announcements and revolutionary new directions. The entire company was required to attend, either in person or virtually. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row of the auditorium. I wanted to observe reactions, not be observed. Bryce took the stage with his usual swagger, dressed in what I called his tech prophet outfit. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers, and a blazer over a t-shirt that probably cost more than my first laptop. Today, he announced after several minutes of corporate cheerleading, we begin a new chapter in Auratech's story. Today, we leave behind the constraints of the past and embrace the limitless potential of the future. The big reveal was what he called Zappy 2.0, a complete reimagining of the predictive behavioral engine. In reality, it was a gutted version of my system with a simplified user interface and a fraction of the analytical power. But it looked prettier. The cartoon lightning bolt mascot now danced across the screen, offering insights that were essentially watered-down versions of what my original system could provide. We've taken what was a complex, engineer-focused tool and transformed it into an intuitive, user-friendly experience that anyone can master in minutes. Bryce proclaimed proudly. From the stage, Kendra Vale caught my eye and smirked. She knew exactly what they'd done. They'd taken my life's work and dumbed it down to appeal to the lowest common denominator. After the presentation, as people filed out of the auditorium, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Diane from HR, wearing the sympathetic expression HR professionals perfect for difficult conversations. Rachel, do you have a moment? Bryce would like to see you in the executive conference room. I knew what was coming. I'd been preparing for it. Still, knowing a punch is coming doesn't make it hurt any less when it lands. The executive conference room was Bryce's preferred space for important conversations. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Denver, a visual reminder of the power dynamics at play. Bryce at the top, looking down on everything below. He wasn't alone. Kendra was there, along with Tyler Reed, Auratech's general counsel. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. Rachel, Bryce began, not bothering to invite me to sit. We've valued your contributions to Oratech, but it's become clear that our visions for the future are no longer aligned. I said nothing, just watched him. My silence seemed to unnerve him. He continued. As you saw today, we're taking the company in a bold new direction, and we need a team that's fully committed to that vision. Still, I said nothing. We've prepared a separation package, Tyler interjected, sliding a folder across the table toward me. It includes 6 months severance, continued health coverage, and an NDA that… I'll need to review this with my attorney. I interrupted, not touching the folder. Bryce's smile tightened. Of course, but we'll need your company devices before you leave the building today. Standard protocol for departing employees. I nodded. I understand. Your office has already been packed up, Kendra added, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. And we've taken the liberty of removing your access to company systems. That's when Bryce delivered what he clearly thought was the killing blow. Just to be clear, he said, leaning forward slightly. All versions of the engine, original code, documentation, everything, have been secured. We've deleted all external copies as a precaution. Standard IP protection. He was telling me they'd destroyed my work, or at least any copies I might have access to. He wanted me to know that I was leaving with nothing. I allowed myself a small smile. Is there anything else? My calmness clearly wasn't the reaction they'd expected. Bryce looked at Kendra, then back at me. Security will escort you out, he said finally. We'll have your personal items shipped to your home address. I nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. Then I paused and turned back. Bryce, I said quietly, do you know what Clause 19B is? His blank expression told me everything. He had no idea what I was talking about. You might want to ask Tyler about it, I suggested, then walked out. 2 security guards were waiting to escort me from the building. As we walked through the open office area, past the desks of people I'd worked with for years, I kept my head high. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked confused or concerned. Marcus gave me the slightest of nods. He knew. Once I was back in my apartment, I didn't waste any time on anger or self-pity. Those emotions would come later, I was sure. But right now, I had work to do. I opened my laptop and pulled up my crypto wallet. With a few keystrokes, I accessed the private blockchain where I'd stored everything. There it was, intact, untouched, exactly as I'd left it. The complete predictive behavioral engine, from the first line of code I'd written in this very apartment to the latest improvements we'd made before Bryce's arrival. They thought they'd deleted everything, but they'd only deleted their copies. The original lived on, distributed across thousands of nodes on the Polygon network, secured by cryptography and my private keys. Next, I composed an email to a lawyer I'd consulted months ago, when I first sensed which way the wind was blowing at Oratech. I attached a PDF of the acquisition agreement, highlighting Clause 19B, and instructed her to send a formal notice to Oratech's legal department invoking my right to repurchase my system for $1. I enclosed a crisp $1 bill in the envelope, along with a brief note to Bryce. I'm taking back what's mine. The chaos that ensued at Oratech over the next few days exceeded even my most optimistic predictions. My lawyer later told me that when Tyler Reed received my letter, he immediately pulled the acquisition agreement from the company's records. That's when he discovered something that Bryce, in his arrogance, had never bothered to learn. The legal integration of my original company into Oratech had never been properly completed. Dennis had started the process, but his retirement had interrupted it. And in the transition to Bryce's leadership, it had fallen through the cracks. Technically, the predictive behavioral engine was still owned by my original company, which had been acquired but not fully absorbed by Oratech. And since I owned that company and had now exercised my right under Clause 19B, Bryce called me in a panic 48 hours after I'd sent my letter. What have you done? He demanded when I answered. Exactly what the contract allows, I replied calmly. I've repurchased my original system and all derivative works for $1. You can't do that. That technology belongs to Oratech. Actually, it belongs to whoever holds the rights to it, which is now me again. Your legal team can confirm that. This is corporate sabotage, he spluttered. We'll sue you into oblivion. For following the terms of a contract your company signed? Good luck with that. By the way, how's Zappy 2.0 working out? I hung up before he could respond. I didn't need to hear his answer. I already knew. Without the full capabilities of the original engine, Zappy 2.0 was nothing more than a pretty interface making educated guesses. Clients would realize that very quickly. Sure enough, the calls started coming in that same day. First from Marcus, my lead developer, who'd resigned from Auratech effective immediately. Then from Emma, our data scientist. Then Raj, our UI specialist. One by one, the core team that had built and refined the engine voted with their feet. They knew where to find me. I'd already leased office space, intentionally in the same building as one of Auratech's biggest clients, Meridian Consumer Products. Small, but with room to grow. Within a week, I'd re-established my original company, now called Phoenix Predictive Solutions, for obvious reasons, with a core team of 7 former Auratech employees. None had non-compete clauses that would stand up in court, especially given the circumstances of my departure. The first thing I did in our new office was set up a whiteboard. Not just any whiteboard, I'd managed to track down Gloria through a maintenance worker who told me where the old office equipment had been stored. She now hung in a place of honor in our main workspace. Bryce's problems were just beginning. Kendra Vale, trying to get ahead of the narrative, posted a self-serving article on LinkedIn titled On Humility in Innovation that talked vaguely about learning experiences and growth through challenges. The comment section was locked after an hour due to the overwhelming negative response. Then, Meridian Consumer Products, which had been Auratech's largest client for crisis management services, announced they were terminating their contract early. Their official statement was diplomatic, citing evolving needs. But industry insiders knew the real reason. They'd seen a demo of Zappy 2.0 and realized it was a pale imitation of what they'd been using before. What Bryce didn't know, but would soon discover, was that I'd already met with Meridian's CEO. I'd shown him what Phoenix Predictive Solutions could offer, the full, original engine, now enhanced with new features we were developing free from corporate constraints. He'd signed with us on the spot. Other clients followed. Some immediately, others after their contracts with Auratech expired. Each time, the story was the same. They wanted the real thing, not the watered-down version Bryce was offering. Within 6 months, Phoenix Predictive Solutions had secured contracts with 12 major corporations, including 5 former Auratech clients. We'd expanded to a team of 22, taking up the entire floor of our building. Our logo, a phoenix rising from a QR code that linked to the blockchain where the original engine was stored, became a symbol of resilience in the tech community. Our tagline, cannot be deleted, cannot be bought, can only be respected. The industry took notice. What had begun as a relatively private corporate dispute became a case study in tech circles. Articles appeared in industry publications with titles like The Blockchain Resurrection, How Rachel Monroe Reclaimed Her Technology, and Immutable Innovation, The Phoenix Predictive Solutions Story. I declined most interview requests. I wasn't interested in becoming a tech celebrity or using our story for marketing purposes. The work spoke for itself, and that was what mattered to me. But when the organizers of Denver Tech, the city's largest annual technology conference, asked me to deliver a keynote after their originally scheduled speaker canceled due to a family emergency, I decided to accept. It was time to tell our story on my terms. The day of the conference, I stood backstage, feeling a familiar mix of nervousness and excitement. The last time I'd addressed a crowd this large was at an Auratech all-hands meeting, before everything fell apart. As I was announced and walked onto the stage, I carried nothing but a small picture frame, no slides, no notes, no props, just that frame, which I placed on the podium in front of me. 8 years ago, I began. I was eating pad thai in a tiny studio apartment, staring at a whiteboard I'd named Gloria, trying to convince myself that what everyone said was impossible might actually be possible. I told them the whole story, the initial idea, the struggles, The breakthrough, the deal with Dennis, the years of growth, and then the arrival of Bryce and the beginning of the end. I described the day I was escorted from the building, the moment when Bryce thought he'd won by deleting all traces of my work. What he didn't understand, I said, is that in the digital age, permanence isn't about physical possession. It's about architecture. I built the engine to predict human behavior. But I built my backup strategy to account for human nature, including the possibility that someone might try to erase what I'd created. I picked up the picture frame and held it up for the audience to see. Inside was a single dollar bill, with my signature on one side and, on the other, the words Clause 19B, written in small, neat letters. They deleted files. I opened my crypto wallet, 8 years of building, one mouse click, a network no one controls, and what they called termination. That was when I took everything back. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. I stood there, holding that framed dollar bill, feeling a complex mix of emotions: pride in what we'd built, gratitude for the team that had stood by me, and yes, a certain satisfaction in having outmaneuvered those who'd tried to erase my contribution. But revenge wasn't the point. Building was, creating was, and now we could do that again, on our own terms. In the months that followed, Oratech's troubles mounted. An internal investigation into the handling of intellectual property led to Bryce Kellen's forced resignation. The company's stock dropped 38% in a single quarter as clients continued to leave. There were rumors of a potential acquisition by a larger firm, at a fraction of what Oratech had been worth under Dennis Marshall's leadership. Meanwhile, Phoenix Predictive Solutions thrived. We secured a round of funding from investors who understood what we were building and why it mattered. We expanded our team, our client base, and our capabilities. The engine evolved in ways it never could have under Bryce's leadership, incorporating new data sources and more sophisticated prediction models. I won't pretend I didn't feel a certain satisfaction watching Oratech struggle while we flourished. I'm human, after all, but I didn't actively work to harm them or celebrate their downfall. That wasn't the point. The point was to build something meaningful, something that couldn't be erased on someone else's whim. Something that was protected not just by legal clauses, but by the very architecture of its storage and operation. That's the real lesson in all of this. In a world where digital assets can be copied, altered, or deleted with a keystroke, true ownership isn't about having your name on a document. It's about building systems that can survive attempts to erase them. It's about creating value that's recognized even when someone tries to deny it. A year after my departure from Oratech, I received an unexpected email from Dennis Marshall, the former CEO who had originally acquired my company. "I heard what happened," he wrote. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. That's not how I wanted things to go. But I'm not surprised by what you've built in response. You always were playing the long game." I wrote back a simple reply: "The game isn't over yet." Because it isn't. This isn't just about one company or one technology or one career. It's about something more fundamental: the right of creators to maintain a connection to what they create, the importance of respecting the vision behind innovation, not just the profit potential. Today, Phoenix Predictive Solutions is still growing. The original team has expanded to over 50 people. We've moved to larger offices, though Gloria the whiteboard still holds a place of honor in our main meeting room. The predictive behavioral engine continues to evolve, now capable of analyzing patterns across an even wider range of platforms and predicting crisis points with even greater accuracy. But more importantly, we're building it with integrity, with respect for the original vision, and with an understanding that what we create has value beyond its immediate commercial application. As for Bryce Kellen, last I heard, he was between opportunities, working as a consultant while trying to repair his reputation. Kendra Vale landed at another company, where she's presumably coming up with mascots for other people's innovations. I don't wish them ill. Their attempt to erase my work led to something stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more successful than what would have existed if they'd simply respected the original vision. They deleted files. I opened my crypto wallet. What they meant for destruction became the foundation for something that could never be destroyed. In the end, that's the most satisfying revenge of all. Not destruction, but creation. Not erasing what others have built, but building something so valuable it cannot be erased. My name is Rachel Monroe. This is my story. And like the technology I created, it's now permanent, impossible to delete, impossible to deny. They thought they could erase me with the click of a button. They were wrong. I'm still here, and I'm just getting started.